Smoke curled through the canopy, thick and acrid, searing Captain Elias Ward's throat as he staggered through the alien jungle. His ship was gone, burned to slag in the ambush, and the screams of his squad still echoed in his head, though silence now reigned. His armor hung in pieces, his rifle half melted, and the jungle around him hissed with unseen predators. He pressed on, driven less by hope than by the soldiers' refusal to die sprawled and helpless on hostile ground. The jungle was unlike any he had known. Colossal trees with bark like iron rose into the sky, their roots coiling like serpents. Phosphorescent spores floated in the air, glowing with a sickly blue light. Something winged shrieked in the distance. Ward paused only when a faint sound reached him, not the growl of a hunter, not the clicking language of the raiders who had downed his squad, but the desperate, choked sob of a child. He moved toward it with caution, hand gripping the jagged remains of his rifle as if it could still serve him. The sobs led him into a clearing where an alien child crouched behind the twisted roots of a fallen tree. Small, fragile, with mottled green skin and wide silver eyes, the child trembled uncontrollably. Bands of woven silk around its arms bore a crest Ward didn't recognize. He saw no wounds, only fear so raw it stabbed into him. Before he could speak, the underbrush split open with violent force. Raiders. 4 of them, armored in scavenged plates, their bodies tall and lean, eyes burning red in the shadows. They had tracked the child. Ward had nothing left to give, no backup, no orders, and no obligation, but he found himself stepping between the hunters and the child, his ruined rifle raised like a club. The first raider lunged, spear thrust low. Ward twisted aside and drove the butt of his rifle into its throat. It crumpled, gasping. The second swung a blade. Ward caught the strike against his arm guard, pain lancing as steel scraped flesh. He countered with a brutal headbutt, bone cracking against bone. The third and fourth circled, hissing. Ward's chest heaved, lungs aflame, but he planted his boots in the dirt and refused to yield. Behind him, the child whimpered, clutching his shredded combat vest. That tiny hand sealed his resolve. He fought not as a soldier bound by mission, but as a man who would not let a child die screaming. He broke one raider's knee with a savage kick, wrested the spear from its hands, and turned the weapon with practiced precision. The last attacker fell with the crude point buried in its chest. When silence returned, Ward swayed on his feet, breath ragged. His body ached, his blood ran hot down his arm, but he was still alive. The child pressed close against him, silver eyes glistening, as if Ward alone could hold back the nightmare. For a moment, Ward thought about pushing the child away. He had no room for this responsibility, no chance of survival burdened with it. But the trembling hand clung tighter, and the words died before they could leave his lips. The jungle was not finished with them. A low rumble grew, the measured steps of something larger, disciplined. Figures emerged through the glowing mist, armored but unlike the raiders, sleek plates, crests of authority, weapons of refined design. Their bearing was unmistakable. Soldiers, but not human. They saw the child, and immediately their ranks shifted. They dropped to one knee, helms bowed, voices raised in reverence. Ward blinked, confusion gnawing through his exhaustion. The crest on the child's arm, he realized, was no mere ornament. This was no ordinary child cowering in the jungle. The soldiers addressed him in their tongue, melodic yet sharp, and the boy responded with a weak chirp. Still, the child refused to step away from Ward, clutching his ruined vest with desperate devotion. One of the alien soldiers leveled a spear toward Ward, suspicion flickering behind the visor. Ward tensed, ready for another hopeless fight, but then the child cried out, wrapping both arms around him. The soldiers hesitated. Their leader barked an order, and the weapons lowered, though unease still radiated from them. Ward stood unsteady, staring at the child who clung as if separation meant death. He had not meant to be here, had not chosen this path, but somehow he had stepped across a line that could never be undone. He looked into the child's luminous eyes, and for the first time since the ambush, he felt the weight of what he had done. He had protected something that mattered far beyond his understanding. And whatever came next, these aliens would not let him simply walk away. Would you like me to now continue with Section 2 in the same narrative style, almost equals 1,000 words, Or would you prefer to insert image prompts for Section 1 first before we move on? The journey to the alien capital blurred into a haze of exhaustion and unease for Captain Elias Ward. The soldiers who had found him marched with precise formation, their armor glimmering like living metal, their weapons pulsing faintly, as if grown rather than forged. None spoke to him directly. Their eyes lingered, suspicious and cold, but the child clinging to his side silenced any thought of stripping him away. Ward trudged through the alien wilderness, each step weighted by blood loss and unanswered questions. By the time the city appeared on the horizon, he could no longer hide his awe. Spires of organic stone rose like the trunks of impossible trees, interwoven with vines that glowed softly, breathing light into the night sky. The walls pulsed with color, veins of bioluminescence running through them like rivers of starlight. The city was alive, both fortress and sanctuary, a marvel of bioengineering far beyond anything human hands had shaped. The soldiers entered with seamless grace, the gates folding open as though recognizing their presence. Ward followed under the watchful gazes of countless citizens, their silver eyes narrowing as they spotted the child at his side and the human who carried him. Inside the palace, silence pressed upon him like a physical weight. Vast chambers of polished shell reflected light in shifting patterns, murals etched into the walls with scenes of war, triumph, and sorrow. The soldiers halted before a dais draped in banners. At its center sat a figure whose presence made the air itself feel heavy. The Queen. Her crown was not metal but a living wreath of luminous tendrils, each pulsing faintly with rhythm like a heartbeat. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on Ward. The child darted from Ward's side and rushed to her, chittering with relief. She gathered him close, murmuring in tones that carried authority even in their gentleness. Yet when the boy pointed back toward Ward, the Queen's expression hardened. She dismissed her guards with a gesture, but they obeyed reluctantly, leaving the human surrounded by distrustful silence. "Who are you?" she said, her voice resonant, each word layered with alien cadence. "That my son clings to you as though his life depends upon it." Ward stood straighter, though weariness threatened to pull him down. "Captain Elias Ward, Terran Defense Corps. My patrol was ambushed. I found him alone. I protected him because no one else would." The Queen's gaze lingered on his torn armor, the blood crusted on his skin, the way the boy hid behind him once more. "You fought raiders?" "I did what was necessary." The chamber's stillness deepened. The boy tugged Ward's arm, refusing to let go. The Queen's eyes softened for a fleeting moment, but when they returned to Ward, they burned with calculation. "You must understand," she said slowly. "Heir to this throne does not cling to outsiders. Yet my son refuses even to be parted from you now." Ward shifted uncomfortably. He had no desire to be tangled in alien royalty or politics. His duty lay with humanity, with surviving long enough to return to his command. "With respect, I saved him because it was right. He's safe now. My place is not here." The Queen tilted her head, and something in her bearing made clear that his protest carried little weight. "Safety is fragile. The raiders who hunted him will return, and others may join them. Already whispers spread through my court. They see in you a disruptor, perhaps even a threat." Ward's jaw tightened. "Then I'll take my leave before I become more of one." The Queen's lips curved in something not quite a smile. "You misunderstand. It is not your choice. My son has bound himself to you. He eats only when you sit beside him, sleeps only when you guard his rest. To remove you would be to wound him deeper than any blade could." And so, she rose, towering in height and authority, her living crown blazing brighter. "You will remain here, at his side, until he chooses otherwise." Ward's instinct rebelled. He had never been a prisoner, never tolerated being ordered into chains, no matter how gilded. His fists clenched, though he knew defiance here would earn him nothing but hostility. The boy's hand squeezed his, small and trembling, anchoring him against the urge to lash out. The Queen descended from the dais and stopped within arm's reach. Her gaze bored into him. "Understand this, human. I do not trust you. Yet my son does, and that is a power no blade, no army can command. For his sake, you will stay. Should you falter, I will end you without hesitation." Her words struck like iron. Ward met her gaze, unflinching. Then you'll have no reason to, he said simply. A long silence stretched before she stepped back. The boy chirped softly and buried his face against Ward's side, clinging tighter. The queen watched, her expression unreadable, then turned away. So be it.
You are bound now.
Not by my will, but by his. Ward stood rigid, bloodied and weary, staring at the throne that had just become his cage. The child's trust had saved him from immediate death, but trapped him in a web he could neither understand nor escape. He had protected a life in the jungle, but in doing so had entangled his own with the fate of a throne and a people that were not his own. And as the queen retook her seat, regal and unyielding, Ward realized a chilling truth. He was no longer free. Days bled into weeks, and Captain Elias Ward found himself unwillingly woven into the rhythm of palace life. The alien city pulsed with order and ritual, its people moving in harmonious patterns that felt almost rehearsed. Yet everywhere Ward went, he felt their eyes on him. Curiosity mingled with suspicion, admiration laced with resentment. To them he was an intruder, a human interloper, tolerated only because the young prince refused to release his grip on him. Prince Kalen trailed him constantly, small hand clinging to Ward's sleeve, silver eyes bright with stubborn loyalty. The boy mimicked his movements with unnerving accuracy, standing straight-backed when Ward did, echoing his clipped military speech, even pretending to inspect corridors like a soldier on patrol. Where once the child had trembled at shadows, he now tried to imitate the iron calm of the human who had shielded him. The palace attendants whispered that the heir had begun saluting guards, a gesture foreign to their culture. Some found it amusing. Others muttered that the human was corrupting the child's essence. Ward tried to keep his distance, yet the boy's attachment left him little choice. He taught him the simplest drills, not weapons but discipline. Breathe steady, Ward would say, kneeling to meet Kalen's gaze. Focus. Fear can cloud judgment, but clear thinking will keep you alive. The boy absorbed each word with fierce concentration. Ward had not meant to become a teacher, much less to an alien prince, but the bond was forged and growing stronger by the day. The queen watched silently. She rarely spoke to Ward outside of formal summons, yet he felt the weight of her gaze whenever he trained the boy or walked the halls. She distrusted him still, but she could not deny the results. The prince had grown bolder, less fragile, more willing to stand tall before the court. The other nobles, however, were far less tolerant. Whispers coiled through the palace like smoke. Several lords petitioned the queen, urging her to cast the human out before he poisoned the air with alien customs. Some went further, claiming that Ward's presence was a calculated plot, that humanity sought to undermine the throne by binding its heir to one of their soldiers. Ward overheard fragments of these mutterings in corridors, though none dared confront him directly. The boy's hand in his was shield enough. But suspicion had sharper edges than words. The first attempt came on a night thick with rain. Ward was roused by the faint scrape of metal near the prince's chamber. He moved instinctively, rolling silently from his cot, weaponless, but alert. Two shadows slipped through the window, blades glinting. Ward intercepted them in the dark, grappling with brutal efficiency. The fight was swift, savage, and silent. When the guards finally burst in, they found Ward standing over the bodies, his knuckles bloodied, his chest heaving, the boy untouched. The Queen's Council erupted the next morning. Some demanded Ward's execution, twisting the tale to suggest he had staged the attempt himself. Others were forced to admit the truth. The human had saved the heir yet again. The Queen silenced them with a single command, her crown glowing brighter than flame. Still, Ward saw in her eyes a flicker of conflict, gratitude battling unease. Despite the tension, Ward could not bring himself to abandon the child emotionally, even if he longed to escape. He had lost men under his command, comrades he could not save. Yet here was one life he had saved, and that fragile victory weighed heavier than all his failures. Kalen's trust was a burden and a gift, shackling Ward to a destiny he had never chosen. The turning point came during a grand ceremony in the throne hall, where nobles gathered in shimmering ranks. The Queen unveiled a new alliance treaty, her voice steady, her words carrying through the vaulted chamber. Ward stood at the edge, tasked only with keeping the prince calm amid the crowd. But he felt the shift before it happened. The unnatural stillness in the air, the ripple of intent hidden beneath formal applause. A figure broke from the assembly, blade drawn, moving faster than the guards could react. Ward shoved Kalen behind him and charged forward. The blade slashed across his ribs, fire lancing through his body, but he refused to fall. He slammed into the assassin, wrestled the weapon free, and drove an elbow into the attacker's throat. The hall erupted with chaos. Guards surged. Nobles shrieked. Ward stood bleeding, shielding the prince once more, refusing to collapse until the threat was ended. The boy's cry cut through the chamber, raw and anguished, his small arms wrapping around Ward's waist as he swayed on unsteady feet. Ward gritted his teeth, vision swimming. He could not remember the last time anyone had cried for him, least of all a child not of his species. The sound anchored him against the blackness threatening to swallow him whole. When the assassin lay dead and the hall was secure, all eyes turned to the human drenched in blood, the boy clinging to him as though to life itself. The queen descended her throne, expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with the entire court watching, she laid a hand upon Ward's shoulder. "You are more than an intruder now," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You are bound to him, by blood and by choice." Ward met her gaze, chest heaving, the boy still pressed against him. He had no words left, no strength for defiance. He had only the weight of what he had become, protector of an alien prince, lightning rod of a kingdom's turmoil, a soldier caught between freedom and duty. And though he longed for home, for the familiar ground of his own kind, he knew the bond forged in battle could not be undone. Would you like me to complete Section 4 next, bringing everything to a climax and resolution, or would you prefer I first create image prompts for all 3 sections so far before moving forward? Captain Elias Ward healed slowly, his ribs bound with alien fabric that pulsed faintly as it knit torn flesh together. He disliked the way it crawled against his skin, but he tolerated it for the boy's sake. Kalen refused to leave his side until the healers drove him out by royal command. Even then, the prince returned each morning, curling beside Ward's cot, as if to guard him in turn. The bond was no longer questioned in whispers, it was plain to all. The heir's heartbeat matched the human's, his trust immovable. Yet for Ward, healing meant returning to the same problem, captivity draped in velvet. His body recovered, but his mind sharpened into one desire, to return home. Humanity needed him. His duty was not to this throne, not to this child, however much the boy's silver eyes anchored him. He rehearsed the words he would use, the way he would demand release with dignity. The queen summoned him before he could speak them. Alone in her chamber, she studied him not as a monarch, but as a mother weighed down by a kingdom's future. "You wish to leave," she said without preamble. Ward stood tall. "I never sought to remain. My place is with my people." Her crown dimmed, as though her thoughts drew its light inward. "And yet my son refuses food unless you sit with him. He rejects training unless you guide him. The child who once trembled at shadows now stands before his court because you gave him the courage. If you depart, he will wither." Ward's jaw tightened. "That is not my choice to bear." Her eyes narrowed, piercing. "Then whose is it?" "His. He is but a boy." "Mine? I cannot command his heart. The truth you refuse is this: you have become part of him. And through him, part of this kingdom." Before Ward could answer, alarm bells thundered through the city, a discordant roar unlike any ritual or ceremony. Guards stormed into the chamber, their voices sharp with panic. The warlord who had long opposed the queen had unleashed rebellion. Armored legions flooded the streets, cutting down civilians, advancing on the palace in disciplined waves. The capital shook with the first volleys of bombardment. Ward moved without hesitation. Pain lanced through his side, but his training surged stronger. "Get the prince to safety," he barked, but the queen shook her head. "No. He must be seen. If he flees now, the throne dies with him. You will lead." The words struck harder than any blade. Ward had no authority here, no claim to command. Yet when he emerged into the palace courtyard, Kalen at his side, the alien guards looked to him, their eyes searching for direction. Perhaps they saw the way the prince clung to him, or perhaps desperation needed no translation. Ward raised his voice, firm and unyielding. Hold the gates. Break their line in the choke points. Fight not for your pride, but for the child who will be your future. His words carried, not in their tongue but in tone, in raw conviction. The soldiers roared in answer, forming ranks with renewed resolve. Ward positioned them with a soldier's eye, funneling the enemy into narrow alleys where their numbers counted for less. He taught them to set ambushes, to use the living architecture of their city as barricades, to strike fast and vanish. His human tactics turned chaos into resistance. The battle raged for hours, smoke searing the sky, bodies littering the glowing streets. Ward fought at the front. Kaelin kept just behind, guarded fiercely by the Queen's champions. Again and again, the rebels surged, only to be broken by discipline they had never faced. Ward bled from reopened wounds, his muscles screaming, but he drove himself forward, knowing that faltering meant the boy's death. At last the warlord himself advanced, towering and brutal, his armor a twisted amalgam of stolen tech and crude steel. He cut through guards like straw, his voice booming with triumph. Ward intercepted him at the palace steps. The clash was vicious, alien strength against human grit. Ward's spear shattered, his ribs burned with every breath, but he refused to yield. With a roar, he drove the broken shaft deep into the warlord's throat, even as the enemy's blade carved across his side. Both fell to their knees, but only Ward rose again, staggering, victorious. The rebels broke. Leaderless, they fled into the burning streets, cut down by the Queen's soldiers. The capital held, though at a price of blood and ruin. Ward collapsed in the courtyard, Kaelin rushing to his side, voice raw with fear. The boy's arms wrapped around him, holding him as tightly as Ward had once held him in the jungle. When Ward woke again, the Queen stood over him, her crown dim but steady. "You saved not only my son but my throne," she said. "Without you, we would have fallen. Now you must choose." She extended her hand, the weight of destiny in her gesture. "Return to your people and go as a hero. Or remain and accept the title no outsider has ever borne, Guardian of the Air. His protector, his mentor, his shield until he takes the throne." Ward looked to Kaelin, who clutched his hand, silver eyes shimmering with desperate hope. He thought of the men he had lost, of the duty that had driven him his whole life. Here, in this strange world, he had been given one life to save, and in saving it, he had found a purpose deeper than orders or allegiance. Slowly, he rose, despite the pain. "I'll stay," he said. "Not because I owe you, because he needs me." The Queen bowed her head, not in command, but in respect. The court erupted in ceremony, guards striking their weapons against the ground, voices raised in a chant Ward did not understand. Kaelin beamed with pride, his small hand gripping Ward's tightly. The human had come as a soldier, prepared only to survive. Now he stood as guardian to a prince, bound by blood and choice, his future intertwined with an alien throne. And for the first time in years, Captain Elias Ward felt whole.